So Baruch Hashem, we're together again. And once again, the weekly Shiur. So for 23 years, I've been giving this Shiur, and Baruch Hashem, we don't miss a week. So the shul is still closed, but we have the possibility and the privilege to see each other, to be together using modern technology. So this Shiur is dedicated either to Parshas HaShavua or to Inyan Haomer. And this week is a combination of both, because we read Parshas haOmer. Parshas haOmer is Parshas haOmer. And in Parshas haOmer, one of the many mitzvahs is Uspartam Lachem HaMochas HaShabbos Miyom HaV'yacham Seimar HaPipo Sheva Shabbos Oistabim Oistiyeno Adma Mochras HaShabbos HaShviyas Tisparu Chamishim Yoim. We are in the midst, right in the middle of Sefira Haomer. So this is a topic we will be discussing today. Minchas Osher Moyadim Chela Gimel that came out right before Pesach. There's a lot of discussions about Sefira Haomer. But today we will be dealing with one specific halacha, 2 words, Temimos Tihiyena. There are many sugis in Sefira Haomer, and we will not discuss today the question of Minyan HaYom and Minyan HaShavuos. Are there 1 mitzvah, are there 2 mitzvahs? Is Sefira Haomer manazad Yuraisa Kishitas HaRambam? Or is it the Rabbanon Kishitas HaTaisis Varash and many other Rishonim? Could one lechatchila count them ben Shmoshes, or does he need to wait till Tzeisach Yechovim? The Shulchan Aruch says Hamedaktikim don't count before Tzeisach Yechovim. These are discussions we dealt with many times in the past. And b'siyata d'shmaya be'ezus Hashem, we will deal with them many times in the future. Today we will be discussing Temimos Tihiyena. So all the Rishonim bring a gewaltige chiddush in the name of the halachas gedolos Rav Yehudai Goin. Taisus brings this chiddush twice in Shas. Megillah Daf Chofa Menachos Samach Vav Amud Aleph. The Rosh, the Ritva, the Ran, all the other Rishonim at the end of Masechet Pesachim. According to the halachas gedolos, all the 49 days are intertwined, attached one to the other. Im shochach yom echad, you lost the mitzvah, and there's no point in continuing to count. That is the shit of halachas gedolos. And why is that? We find 2 different explanations, 2 different approaches. Most of the Rishonim, quoting halachas gedolos, explain Temimos Tihiyena. And Temimos means a total count of 49 days. And therefore, if you missed 1 day, you lack Temimos. You don't have Temimos. And that is why you lost the entire mitzvah. Sefer HaChinuch Shin Vav. And we find the same in Tshuvas HaRalbach. Reb Levi ben Chaviv, more than 500 years ago, he was the Rav in Yerushalayim Yirakoinish. And the Ralbach, like the Sefer HaChinuch, they explain the opinion of halachas gedolos is 49 days are 1 mitzvah, mitzvah achas. So if you skip 1 day, it's like eating a kazayas matzah, pochos mashu. It's almost a kazayas. But if you don't have a kazayas, you don't have the mitzvah. If you have 48 days, you don't have the mitzvah, because all the 49 days are 1 mitzvah. Therefore, if you lose 1 day, you're losing part of the mitzvah. And just like any mitzvah, you need to be mekayim in its totality. Same goes for Sefira Haomer. So there are 2 different approaches to explain the halachas gedolos. I'm sure that everyone listening to me right now would say, so why don't we check the halachas gedolos? Let him speak for himself. We wish he would. But in the Sefer halachas gedolos Shetachas Yudeinu, and there are various different publications, and this halacha doesn't appear. It's a wonder, but it's not in the halachas gedolos. So obviously, all the Rishonim had a certain version of the halachas gedolos which we don't have. Becomes even stranger. Some Rishonim, like the Kolboy, quote the opposite opinion in the name of halachas gedolos. And according to the Kolboy, the halachas gedolos brings an opinion that all the 49 days are attached one to the other, and he rejects that opinion and he says, no, one day has nothing to do with the other. The Ran, the very end of Masechet Pesachim, the Ran brings in the name of halachas gedolos. If you miss the first day, you lost all the others because it's not to mitzvah. And Rav Hai Gaon, and Rav Yehudai Gaon, and Rav Hai Gaon were two of the greatest Gaonim. And Rav Hai rejects the halachas gedolos and he says, if you miss the first day, you lose the entire mitzvah because it's not to mitzvah. The same would apply to any other day in the middle. What's the difference between day number one and all the other days? So we find two different opinions of what the shita of halachas gedolos is, and two different explanations, assuming that halachas gedolos says that if you miss any of the 49 days, you lost out your mitzvah, what the explanation is. So we wish that halachas gedolos would share his shita with us, but he doesn't, because it doesn't appear in our haitzos, in our halachas gedolos. So anyway, two different explanations why the halachas gedolos maintains if you skipped one day, you lost the entire mitzvah. Either because that's not mimois or because it's mitzvah. Would there be enough communion between the two different approaches? I think so. I think so. If a person forgot to count one day, somewhere in the middle, are all the brochas lemafreya brocha levatola? And if so, it has huge consequences. Huge. Mishnah Berurah, at the beginning of Siman Tov Beites, quotes a Sefer Shulchan Shloimo that says, women shouldn't count at all with a brocha. And why not? He writes two reasons. One reason is they don't understand what they're counting. I think our women, our wives, our mothers, our daughters would be extremely offended if we would share this Mishnah Berurah with them. They don't understand. They understand very well. They understand as good as we do. They all speak Lashon Kodesh. Why wouldn't they understand? So we're living in a different world. Going back hundreds of years, most Noshim Tzidkoniyos didn't know Lashon Kodesh. We're living in a different world. The other reason is that they will probably forget someday in the middle, and therefore it's better they shouldn't start counting with the brocha at all. This is correct if we assume that if you lose one day in the middle, all the other days you counted before that day that you skipped are lemafreya, void, and therefore the brocha is a brocha levatorah. And I think this depends on the two different approaches. If we say all the 49 days are one mitzvah, yes, then it goes without saying. If you lost one day, you lost the entire mitzvah from beginning to end, from A to Z. No, let's say from Aleph to Taf, not from A to Z. Because if you ate matzah and you ate almost like a zayis, like you didn't eat the last crumb, then you don't have a mitzvah. The same would go for Sviyas Oima. But if we say the reasoning of halachas gedolos is a concept of tmimos, then one might argue it's only mekanu lahaba. You can't count 11 if you didn't count 10. You can't say 20 if you don't have 19, because 20 comes after 19, 10 comes after 11. But as long as your count was a total count and you didn't skip a day, then you were mekayim the mitzvah. And that's the chelik that came out just before Pesach. I strongly argued, I don't think there's really a machlekes. And I think when the Sefer Chinuch says that all the days are mitzvah achas, he doesn't really mean in the classical sense mitzvah achas. After all, we say a brocha every night. It's unprecedented. You don't say a brocha on chelkei ha-mitzvah. You don't say a brocha on parts of a mitzvah. I think that even the Sefer Chinuch that says 49 days are one mitzvah, what he means to say is it is as if one mitzvah regarding this detail, that if you skipped one day, you lost the entire mitzvah. But anyway, this is the shitta of halachas gedolos. And as I said, all the Rishonim quote this shitta, and most of them reject halachas gedolos. So what's the halacha? The halacha is somewhat of a compromise. So in Siman Tov Peites, that is the Siman of Svias Umayma. Sachakol, we have 9 seifim, the entire halachas of Svias Umayma. And a Sif Ches, the Shulchan Aruch says, Im shochach lavorach be'echod hayomim, eino yochol lispoy bevracha. He needs to continue the count, but without a bracha. And why is that? Because it's a suf. On one hand, of course, he needs to continue to count, because most of the Rishonim, the Bali HaTosfos, reject halachas gedolos, and according to their opinion, you have a chiyuv gomer to continue the count. But the Shulchan Aruch paskins you can't say a bracha, and why is that? Because we are choishes shem halachik halachas gedolos, and safek brachas lakula. So regarding the bracha, you cannot say a bracha. This is a point which is very important, and I always tell shlichei tzibur, when you say the bracha and Svias Umayma and you count out loud, you need to be mechaven to be moitzi the tzibur. In our day and age, the shliach tzibur is not really moitzi acherim midei chayvosim because all are lucky. And as we learn in the Tur and B'si Yosef and Siman Chav Daled, and it's also in Rambam, Chazos Shatz B'Zmazayin was more of a minhag and a takana, because the Chazan isn't moitzi anyone yedei chayvosai, and therefore the shliach tzibur no longer has intention to be moitzi acherim. But when it comes to Sfiras Umayma, he needs to have clear kavana to be moitzi acherim yedei chayvosai b'brocha, because almost in every shul, especially when you have big minyanim, someone out there cannot say a bracha. It's very common that someone skipped one day, and he needs to be yotze with you, because on one hand, he does continue to count. Most of the Rishonim say he's mechuyev to count, but he can't say the bracha. And it's not enough that he is mechaven to be yotze. It's tzorech kavanas shomeya v'kavanas mashmiya, as we learn in Megillah Daf Chav Tes, and that's a halacha pshuta. So when the shliach tzibur says the bracha out loud, he needs to be mechaven lahoitzi acherim yedei chayvosam. Preferable that when it comes to the Sefira, he should not have kavanah to be moitzi acherim yedei chayvosam, in order not to get into the problems of mitzvah sichas kavanah if you're mechaven, but that's not ma'akev. So anyway, the Shulchan Aruch is machmir to shittas halachas gedolos. So we're machmir on both ends. You do continue to count, because most of the Rishonim don't agree with the halachas gedolos, but you can't say the bracha because safek brachas lekula. And then there is an other machlokes between halachas gedolos and Baalei HaTosfos. And this other machlokes is also brought in the very same Tosfos, Samach Vav Amud Aleph Masechet Menachos. According to halachas gedolos, b'diavad, if you forgot to count by night, you could count in the morning. Tosfos disagree, and Tosfos says no. Svias Umayma b'layla is ma'akev. And if you forgot to count b'layla, you no longer have a mitzvah in the morning. And interestingly, in this machlokes, the Mechaber has exactly the same approach, and that is Siv Zayin. You need to count by night. Shochach b'layla, soifa b'yoyim, b'li bracha. Why without a bracha? Same logic, exactly the same. According to halachas gedolos, Svias Umayma b'layla is not meyakev b'diavad. But most of the Rishonim disagree with halachas gedolos, and they say layla is dafka layla. So if you forgot to count by night, you should count in the morning. Maybe the halacha is in accordance to the halachas gedolos, but you can't say a bracha. Maybe the halacha is in accordance to the Baalei HaTosfos that say there's no mitzvah to count in the morning. Once again, you count without a bracha. So the basic logic is the same in the Shulchan Aruch and the B'si Yosef regarding both pluktas. Mishnah Brira Sif Cotton Mem Hey, interesting. So if you forgot to count by night, you count in the morning without a bracha. Why can't they say a bracha? Because maybe you don't have a mitzvah at all. Says the Mishnah Brura, but if you wait till night, and from this night on till the end of the Sefira, you do say a brocha every night. And why is that? Isn't that a tema? Isn't that a contradiction? You didn't let him say a brocha in the morning because maybe it's not a mitzvah. So how could he say a brocha on all the other nights if he skipped one day? Maybe it's not a mitzvah. He counted in the morning. That doesn't mean anything. So the Mishnah Brura explains his opinion in Shiur and Sifkot Memhei, and he writes, regarding all the other nights, the coming nights, it's a svek haOmer. Because even if he entirely skipped a day, it's only a suffix. Maybe he was yaitze. Maybe ein halacha kechumres halachas gedolos. And now we have a suffix whether we skipped the day at all. Because maybe the halacha is like the halachas gedolos, so you could count in the morning, so he didn't skip a day. So there are two tzdodim lechumra, and a svek lechumra, we say a broch. Now, I do not question the Mishnah Brura's logic. It's very sound logic. But what is a tema b'yeinai? The Moreh D'Shmait says the Trumas Adeshin. And the Beis Yosef quotes the Lashon of the Trumas Adeshin, and that is not what he says. What the Mishnah Brura quotes, the Svar of Svek haOmer, is the Pri Chodesh. Godol Maraban Shemoi, the Pri Chodesh was a giant. But the source of this halacha is in Trumas Adeshin, and the Trumas Adeshin says something else. So why would the Mishnah Brura ignore the Trumas Adeshin and adopt the explanation of Pri Chodesh? Maybe because the Trumas Adeshin was a tema b'yeinai, and many have difficulty understanding what the Trumas Adeshin is saying. So the Trumas Adeshin said, you forgot by night you could count in the morning without a brocha. But all the other coming nights you count with a brocha. And why is that? Kivan sheloi dileg yomei echad legamrei have miut tamimos. Well, he didn't skip an entire day, and therefore it is tamimos. And many don't understand. How could you say it's tamimos? You didn't let him say a brocha in the morning because maybe it's not a mitzvah at all. And if it's not a mitzvah at all, how could it be tamimos? So let me share with you my understanding of the Trumas Adeshin. And to me, it seems to be so pashut. And many times I have this strange feeling when I say something, and to me it seems to be so pashut, and I wonder, why doesn't everybody say it? Not only why doesn't anyone say it, why doesn't everybody say it if to me it seems to be such a svara pshuta? And in this case, I really think that it's pashut. So before sharing with you my pshat, I want to ask an additional question, and that is a very Yiddish style. So people always said, when a Jew gives an answer, it's always with another question before he gives the answer. So yes. So what I say now is a Yiddish pshat. Tosfos brings the halachas gedolos at the end of the Tosfos Samach Vav Amud Aleph. Halachas gedolos say, if you skipped one day, you no longer have a mitzvah. And Tosfos says, "V'zeh tema v'lo yitochen." It's a tema, it's a wonder, and it's impossible. That style is usually very annoying. You know, try to think, you're sitting at a daf yomi, you're sitting in yeshiva, and you say a svara, you say a chiddush, you say a din, and then your friend says, no, it's nonsense, it's impossible. Maybe your own explanation, why is it impossible? Why do you think I'm not right? You need to put up an argument. You can't just say, no, shtusim, you're not right. And that's not the style of Tosfos. Zatema v'lo yitochen. Tosfos were the masters of pilpul. I don't know when I shared this with you, but the Marshal was a gewaltige chassid of Gedolei Ashkenaz Baalei Tosfos. And the Marshal generally was very outspoken. There's an amazing tshuva in Oida B'Yehuda. Somebody wonders on a Marshal who wants to reject the Marshal from a Rashba. And the Oida B'Yehuda writes him, you don't know who you're dealing with. The Marshal was 300 years younger than the Rashba, more than 300 years, but he had no problem arguing with the Rashba. So the Mashal was a big chassid of Baalei Tosfos, and the Yamshish Shlomo Baba Kami describes the greatness of Baalei Tosfos. Also was Kol HaTalmud Kikado v'Gilgeluho Memokim Lemokim. They made the entire Talmud, the entire Shas, like a ball, and they rolled that ball from here to there and from there to there. So you're familiar with sports. Most sports have balls, and that ball is being thrown or kicked or whatever. And the great Baalei Tosfos, their basic assumption was that the Shas needs to be consistent. And that was a chiddush in their time. And they found 1,000 contradictions. And to reconcile and be miyashiv those 1,000 contradictions and to answer those 1,000 questions, there were mechadish elef alfei halachos. And that's how Torah developed and blossomed and grew. So the greatness of Baalei Tosfos is to ask questions and to give terutzim. It's very uncommon. I don't remember in Tosfos. Taima lo yetochen. So let me try to explain to you what I think Tosfos is saying. So on that very same Tosfos, we find two pluktis between Baalei Tosfos and halachas gedolos. And I think it's not coincidence that we find those two machlokes in the same Tosfos. Those two machlokes are one, and the two sides of the very same coin. So Amenachas Samech Hayomid Beis, the Gemara says, Sheva Shavuos Tamimois Tienu, Amos Sayen Tamimois Bezman Shatu Sofer Belaylo. Why do you need to count Svias HaOmer by night? Because the Torah says Tamimois. And the Jewish day is a unit of night and day. So days are not total, they're not whole, unless they start by night. The Jewish day doesn't start by sunrise. It starts by Tzeis HaKoichavim. Amos Sahen Tamimois Bizman Sha'ato Seifer Balayim. So we could interpret Tamimois in two different ways. One pshat would be a count of whole days. And the concept of Tamimois refers to every day into itself, as an entity into itself. And therefore you need to count day and night. So you need to start counting by night. Another approach to explain Tamimois would be a total count of 49 days. And Tamimois doesn't refer to each and every day into itself, but rather as a totality of 49 days. But Tamimois is either this or that. Tamimois can't have two different perushim which contradict one another. And the Gemara suggests only one pshat in Tamimois we do not find in other pshat. And the Gemara says, Amos Sayen Tamimois Badman Sha'atu Seifer Balaylo. And that is machlokes number one between Tosfos and the Ba'an. Halachas Gedolos says that the din of Sefira Balaylo is only lechatchila, it's not ma'akev b'diavad. And if you didn't count by night, you still could be makayim the mitzvah in the morning with a bracha. So it's clear as daylight, according to the Halachas Gedolos, that is only an asmach, it's not a din d'oraisa. If it would be a drosha gemura, it would be a din d'oraisa, it would be ma'akev b'diavad. Pashut hadavar. So the Halachas Gedolos maintains, yes, we do find in the Gemara Amos Sayen Tamimois Bizman Sha'atu Seifer Balaylo, but that's just an asmachta. The reason is, Svias HaOmer needs to be similar to Ktsiras HaOmer. This is not a drosha gemura, and therefore it's only lechatchila. But b'diavad, if you count in the morning, it's okay. Tosfos disagree. And Tosfos maintain even b'diavad ein svira b'yoim elo b'laylo. Because according to Tosfos, this is a drosha gemura. And the Gemara says, Amos Sayen Tamimois Bizman Sha'atu Seifer Balaylo. And therefore, when the Halachas Gedolos comes up with chiddush number 2, and he says, if you missed one day, you lost the entire Sefira, And it's obvious, because in his opinion, Tamimois does not refer to each and every day into itself, but Tamimois is a total count of 49 days. And it's l'shitosoi that if you skip night, you could count in the morning. That's not a drosha gemura, that's only a din darabanan. But Tosfos already in this very same Tosfos rejected halachas gedolos number 1. And Tosfos says, no, this is a drosha gemura, and if you skip the night, you don't have a mitzvah to count in the morning. And that is why when Tosfos brings halachas gedolos number 2, Tosfos is simply astonished. And Tosfos says, Zatema, v'lo yetochen, because you can't have it both ways. Tamimois can be every day as Yom Tomim and a totality of 49 days. It's either this or that. And if Tosfos already argues, and Tosfos makes it clear that if you miss the count by night, you can't count in the morning, and you're not yotzeh. It is only because the Gemara says, Amos ahin tamimois bishman she'ato soifa balaylo. So Tosfos simply says, so there's no source and no possibility to be machadish a new din of tamimois connecting one day with the other, and therefore Tosfos simply says a tema v'lo yitochen. And that is pshat in the Trumas edition, and it's so poshut. So if you forgot to count by night and you did count in the morning, we don't let you say a bracha. Because maybe Tosfos is right, that Sfiras Oim is only balaylo, and in the morning there's no mitzvah at all. Why is that? Because it's not Tamimois. Amos and Tamimois man zman shat l'soifa balaylo. But then the coming night and all the others, of course you can make a bracha. Mimanavshach. Mimanavshach. No reason in the world that you can't make a bracha. Because it's either or. If Tamimois says that you need entire days, and that is why we didn't let him make a bracha in the morning, then Tamimois cannot mean that you need 49 days. It's either this or that. So if he skipped the night, but he did count in the morning, he could have no problem counting all the other days. Mimanavshach. If Tamimois means a totality, a total count of 49 days, then he has 49 days. Because if that's pshat in Tamimois, you could count in the morning. So if you need a total count of 49 days, he has 49 days. Because then Sfiras Oim is kosher b'yoyim. If Sfiras Oim is pasul b'yoyim, the only reason would be because Tamimois means a count of total days, of whole days. Then one day has nothing to do with the other. So isn't that posuk pshat in Trumas edition? Kivan shaloi dileg yomei echad legamrei havi mihu Tamimois. So if you forgot by night and you counted in the morning, all the other days, it's Tamimois mimanavshach. Because if we assume that he lost a day, then one day has nothing to do with the other. He could count all the other days. If we assume one day does have to do with the other, then he didn't lose any day. Then he counted every day, because then Sfiras Oim is kosher b'yoyim. So I think that is pshat in the halachas gedolos. The Mishnah Berurah offers totally different approach. Now, as I said before, I don't question the logic of the Mishnah Berurah, and he's right, because there are other halachas which are based on the assumption that a svek haOmer we do say a bracha. Going back to Sif Ches and the Shulchan Aruch says if you skipped one day, you cannot continue to count with a bracha. But if you have a safek whether you skipped a day, you could count with a bracha. And why is that? svek sveke. Because even if we're confident and we're sure that he did skip a day, it's still a suffix. And the suffix is based on the prukta and the rishonim. Maybe the halacha is in accordance to halachas gedolos, but maybe not. And if he has a suffix whether he skipped a day, svek sveke. And when there's svek sveke haOmer, he could say a bracha. So the logic of the Shartzi and the Mishnah Berurah is sound, and it's based on the Pri Chodesh. I just wonder, why not let the Tumas edition speak for himself? Because the Morad Ishmaitz is the source of this halacha and Tumas edition, and obviously the Tumas edition says something else. And today I tried to explain the svara of the Tumas edition as I understand it, as I see it. So this, most of the shaylas I have in Sefira haOmer, besides Dini Avelis, are connected with the halachas gedolos, because it is common that people forget. And maybe this year it's less common, because this year all those people that are davening b'yachidus definitely don't forget to daven Marav, and if you don't forget Marav, probably you won't forget Sefira haOmer. But maybe to the contrary, when you daven with a minyan, then the Shliach Tzibur says Sefira haOmer, you can't forget. But if you're davening b'yachidus, it might happen, especially when you don't have many family members and you're davening on your own, then you might forget to count Sefira. But every year there are many, many shaylas regarding the halachas gedolos, and in my sforim I dealt with these shaylas at great length. So this is a fascinating topic, and I think today we clarified a very fundamental halacha in a way, and I think what I say is extremely compelling and extremely misyashiv alalev, and I think that is the pshat in halachas gedolos.